In the Oklahoman newsroom, this is an OSU update. I'm Jenny Carlson. Mason Rudolph's foot continues to be a topic of conversation and some concern amongst Cowboy fans. Kyle Fredrickson joins us on the phone to give us the latest. Kyle, what do we know at this point about Rudolph's status? We know at least that he's practiced a couple times, right?
Right. Going into to Monday's press conference, the last one that OSU players and coaches did before heading out to New Orleans, we were hoping to get a few more answers. We were told that Rudolph was going to be there and to possibly discuss his injury. Of course, Mike Gundy and Coach Yursich were there as well. But it turns out that Rudolph was a no-show for whatever reason, and Yursich basically deflected any questions about the injury to Gundy, and Gundy kind of gave us the same spiel that we've heard before. So not a whole lot was answered. I think at this point we can say confidently that, Coach Gundy is using the media to kind of bring out mixed messages here to give Ole Miss a lot to think about as it heads into that Sugar Bowl matchup in terms of preparing for either Walsh or Rudolph. But at this point, I think it's very likely that we'll at least see J.W. Walsh, a hefty amount of him at least, in that Sugar Bowl, being that, it doesn't sound like Gundy is all that confident that Rudolph is for sure going to be healthy and play. Now, there's certainly a number of practices left where his stock can improve. He's expected to join some of these team period drills where the Cowboy offense goes against the Cowboy defense. And that's really where they get the bulk of their really good game planning in terms of preparing for Ole Miss. That'll play out this week in Stillwater and then next week when the Cowboys head to New Orleans. But it's certainly kind of an uncomfortable situation, I think, for this offense in terms of knowing who their guy is going to be, because based on just how this offense has looked when it's clicking its best, there's no doubt that Rudolph is the guy they want back there.
Well, and Mike Gundy, during his availability on Monday, Kyle, will be the last that we hear from the Cowboys before they get to New Orleans for the game later this week, over the weekend. He basically said he feels like it's at least going to be a 50-50 split between Walsh and Rudolph at this point. I don't know if that's more or less than they thought before. I mean, like you said, I'm not real sure that we learned a whole lot, because it just sounds like they're still trying to work through this and figure out exactly what they do have in terms of what can Mason Rudolph do on that repaired foot.
Right. And, and really it's not all that different from how they've gone into every one of these games. This J.W. Walsh package they installed in the preseason, of course they wanted to throw the senior a bone and let him have a role in this offense. But they really went into every game not knowing how much it was going to be used. And that's really showed itself in a lot of these different games, to where, at Texas Tech, we saw a heavy dose of Walsh in the second half, to where he was throwing deep passes. In other games, we only saw him in some red zone sets. So it kind of depends on the ebbs and flows of the offense. In an ideal situation, I think that's what Mike Gundy wants to happen for this bowl game, possibly bringing out the starter in Mason Rudolph, seeing how he performs on that foot. If he plays well, keep him in there. If he doesn't, change the pace and go to Walsh. I think this is just a situation, at least for OSU fans, where they can feel optimistic in the fact that they have a second-string quarterback they feel so confident in, being that there's a lot of teams this time of year that if they were facing similar issues at that position, there'd be a lot more question marks as to whether it would be a team that could win a game. But the Cowboys are certainly happy to have Walsh back there, too.
Yeah, as we've well seen, Kyle, when you look at teams like TCU playing with second and third string guys, Baylor playing with second and third string guys, it happens, and sometimes it doesn't turn out all that great. But you mentioned how effective J.W. Walsh has been, and it's true. His numbers are really remarkable. His efficiency when he's on the field, especially when he's playing in concert with Rudolph. But Kyle, you're actually working on a piece for our Saturday paper and on News OK that will appear about just how good Rudolph has been, and the fact that some of Walsh's numbers, the eye-popping qualities of them, have almost obscured just how good Rudolph has been this year.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of different things you can look at in terms of, I guess, just Rudolph's greatness this season. And statistically, he's not among, the top 2 or 3 guys in a lot of categories, simply because J.W. Walsh has taken those numbers from him in the red zone. Rudolph wasn't a guy who popped up on any of these all Big 12 lists, not even as an honorable mention. But when you look at the top quarterbacks in this league, there's no doubt that he belongs in that conversation. And the biggest thing that stands out to me, and something that I'll take a deeper dive into, is just how successful this guy was on third down this year. I mean, it was pretty incredible what he was able to do in third and long situations without much of a run game. To the point where Mike Gundy Monday in his walk-off said he can't remember another OSU quarterback who has been as good in those situations. And it goes back to what we've written about Rudolph in the past, you know, him being a guy who likes to have the ball in his hands and pressure situations. You know, we saw that in all these comeback victories he had, even going back to Bedlam and the Cactus Bowl of last year and those performances. So there's no doubt that he thrives in those situations, and it's been so critical in the Cowboys getting to 10 wins this year. But, you know, you're right. It's strange that for everything that he's done, you know, maybe it's gone a little bit unappreciated just simply by the fact that, you know, Walsh has been so productive. And one reason that, you know, you don't see much of a reaction from Rudolph in terms of being upset or showing any kind of visibility, you know, that this is a situation that's tough on him, is because of the respect he has for J.W. Walsh. You know, we're talking about a guy who's really in kind of a mentor-mentee relationship, you know, so one more game of it in what we expect, you know, considering that Walsh isn't expected to come back for another year, being that he should fill his eligibility. You know, maybe next year is really when we get to see this offense thrive if Mason Rudolph is healthy, as being the lone guy. And I think at that point it'd be pretty tough for anybody to overlook him.
Yeah, like you mentioned, Kyle, those third down conversions that we saw again and again. J.W. Walsh doesn't have a chance to punch it in from the red zone without some of those third down conversions keeping drives alive. I know people are going to want to check out that story on Saturday as Kyle takes a deeper dive into just how good Mason Rudolph was this season. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.